If I had to speak English at work, I would avoid these three mistakes. So if you need to speak English at work to customers, to your colleagues, to your managers, watch this video until the end because these mistakes are more common than you realize. And by the way, I am Teacher Prix, always helping people learn how to talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime in English. Subscribe to the channel, but let's get started, right? The first thing that I see students doing at work, well, at work you're not a student, you're just a no-native speaker. I see that you guys tend to overcomplicate your sentences. You try to embellish your emails. You try to embellish your sentences. And all of that may sound more confusing, more complicated than your desire, which is to sound fluent. There is a very thin line between sounding fluent, sounding sophisticated, and sounding awkward. And this is the kind of work you need to do because there's nothing wrong with sounding sophisticated, sounding advanced, and using a polished version of your English. Nevertheless, if you don't know how to do that, you will sound awkward. You will sound strange. You will sound off. And this is something that I have seen happening again and again. But you could be wondering right now, Priscilla, fine. I see what you mean. I get your point. What am I supposed to do? How do I sound polished and advanced and impress my boss and impress my colleagues without sounding like the strange, non-native speaker who is trying to show off with the latest advanced expression I saw on YouTube? Now we're getting somewhere. That's a good question. I hope that's the question you asked. You need to be very careful with the expressions and idioms and phrasal verbs you're studying. More importantly, you need to understand how to use them. And using those words, those expressions, those different phrasal verbs will require understanding collocation, contextualization. If you're having an informal meeting with your manager, one-on-one, just to touch base on a particular subject, it's something a little bit more informal. Why the hell are you going to sound all serious and use really advanced wording when you don't need to? Conversely, if you're having a meeting with the legal team of your company, that's when you have to shine. So understanding situations, understanding the level of formality, just because you're at work doesn't mean you're always going to sound formal unless you have a very particular career. So you tell me here in the comments, what do you do for a living? What kind of work environment? If you're a nurse, if you're a doctor, if you're a teacher's assistant, if you're an Uber driver, if you are a construction worker, if you're an architect, you need to analyze situations. Let's say you're an architect. Depends on the customer. Read your customer, understand who your customer is before you start trying to sound super fluent, because fluency is about communication. And if your English speaking is not clear, it doesn't matter how many idioms, how many expressions, how many advanced connectors and grammar sentences you know. If you use them with the wrong person at the wrong time, you will just sound off. That's a very important point that you need to understand about this first mistake, which is complicating the way you talk. And a few years ago, I used to work for this bank, and I noticed this pattern with one of my managers. And he had a very good English, very good communication skills. But sometimes during meetings, I noticed that with our director from the United States, I noticed that he tried to use some verbs that he was not supposed to use. And it was not part of his regular communication. And in most cases, he was using those words incorrectly. I tried helping him every now and then to show him, hey, this context right here, that's a good opportunity to use this verb. On the other hand, don't do this here. And then he started listening to me. He started accepting my feedback. He was my manager after all. But his English was impeccable. It was actually very good. Sometimes he exaggerated the intonation to sound more serious. And all of that complication and exaggeration made him sound less fluent. At the end of the day, simplicity wins. People were always impressed by my English at work because I kept it simple. I was having a meeting with a guy from Florida yesterday. We were talking about YouTube strategies and how to use YouTube tools and things like that. And then he apologized for his English. He's American. And then he said, "Oh, I apologize because you are so, your pace is so good. You speak slowly and you have such a good intonation. And here I am. I don't stop. I'm going too quickly." And I told him, "You know what? That's your style, which is fine. You do speak a little faster than usual, but I feel like you're very enthusiastic. So it's no problem. I don't have any problems understanding you. So you can keep it up." And then he told me, "Oh, how do you do this?" That's when I told him, "I'm a teacher." That's when he realized, "Oh, okay, that's why you talk like this, because you're a teacher." And then I told him, "Exactly, I'm a teacher, so I am supposed to slow down because fluency is communication, not perfection." So he was speaking rather quickly and he was cutting sounds, and he sounded like he was in a rush. And that is not nice depending on where you are. That's why he apologized, and he realized that he was sounding like he was gonna miss miss his flight and he had to finish very quickly. Okay, so he apologized, and I said, "Look, it's fine by me. I feel like you're very enthusiastic, so if this is your style, I'll just roll with it." And he went on, and he did speak like he was going to miss something really important, that he was in the rush. Personally, I don't like that kind of communication style because it does send the message that, hey, I don't have time to waste. Let's keep it up. Let's wrap things up and let's go. I don't like that kind of intonation, but hey, I have to respect people's speaking style. But if you are a no native speaker like me, even though I have total respect and understanding for your speaking style, you need to understand you cannot do the same in the English language because of your pronunciation barriers, intonation barriers, grammar, and vocabulary barriers. If you try to do the same you do in your own essence in the English language, what is going to happen? People may not understand you, because what's the point of speaking quickly when nobody gets what you're saying? So this is something that you also need to consider, okay? Moving on to the second one, which is rather popular. And despite the fact native speakers do it all the time, we cannot. We should not. I dare say we may not. But it is your decision after all. And depending on your speaking habits, on your speaking repertoire, this is going to happen quite a lot, which is the constant use of filler sounds and filler words. Even I am doing this right now. I'm not talking to a business person right now. As I was talking to him yesterday, I was much more mindful of my use of filler sounds and filler words. And even now, I'm trying to be as mindful as possible, because reducing filler sounds and filler words will require attention. Attention to what I'm saying. Focusing on the person in front of me while paying attention to my choice of words, without feeling like I need to rush and finish my sentences as quickly as possible without using any filler sounds and filler words. It's fine to pause as long as you're intentionally pausing, not because you don't know what to say, but because you're making an informed decision of what the best word is. That's fluency. That is something that you can learn how to do. You need proper guidance and feedback, but we're going to talk about this soon. As I was saying, filler sounds and filler words are very common. Native speakers use them all the time. They resort to filler sounds because the language is becoming rather informal. Therefore, it is very natural to hear this in work environments, but then we have to analyze the context, the situation again. If you're a lawyer, if you're a nurse, if you're a teacher, if you're a doctor, if you're a construction worker, if you're a babysitter, what kind of job do you do? And what kind of impression do you want to give? That's very important. So removing filler sounds and filler words will require proper Speaking training. By the way, I have a 30-day speaking challenge available. Link in the description. If you want to master your English speaking, you should definitely participate in this speaking challenge. I know you're going to like it. Filler sounds will make you sound less professional, whether you're American, Canadian, native speaker, or not. It doesn't matter, especially if you work in a more formal environment. I have seen human resources interviews where they describe situations where they had to say no to a candidate who was extremely competent but couldn't speak the English language properly. Why? Well, they were constantly breaking the sentences with stupid words, empty expressions. You know what I'm saying? Watch out for that. We watch movies nowadays, TV shows, influencers on social media, TikToks, and Instagram. Everything is so informal that you may not even realize that the expression you think is amazing is actually an empty expression. So watch out for that. Study that. In order to improve your communication and your flow, you need to practice your English speaking consistently. Of course, ideally, you have someone correcting your English. That's what I'm offering in this challenge, by the way. Ideally, that's what you should have, someone to correct you. This is what I do with my students in my academy. This is what I do with my private students. This is what I'm going to do in this challenge and in other products that I have available. Because you need to understand your patterns. You need to understand how to prepare yourself for speaking exercises. And the proper repetition, the proper preparation will help you reduce the use of filler sounds. Raising awareness, what I am doing right now, I am paying more attention to my choice of words. As a result, I may be slowing down, which is fine. I am sounding fluent. I am excited about the content of my conversation right now. So that is healthy. Don't feel guilty for slowing down if that means you're reducing the filler sounds and filler words and the necessary vocabulary that we learn out there, which will not actually help us sound more fluent, especially if you're at work. Got it? Awesome. And finally, this is something that I talk a lot about with my business students. If you want to have one-on-one lessons with me, I also coach a lot of business students, students who need to make presentations, students who are currently going through job interviews and trying to find a better position, who are trying to grow and climb the career ladder. So if that is you, let me know. I will also leave my email, so if you need more information about it, I'll be happy to assist you. But something that I've noticed among my business students is that when they have to give presentations, they prepare these slides and they practice. But unfortunately, many of them end up reading the presentations. And what happens during the presentation? If there is an interruption, if there is something unpredictable, they get lost. If there's a question out of context, they feel out of sorts, like something is wrong, something is off. And when you read your presentation, your intonation will change. This happens to most people. Not everyone can read a sentence, can read a text, and sound like they're talking. This is very difficult to be done, especially for non-native speakers. Reading and sounding like you're speaking, that is hard. So if you're always preparing your presentations and reading them in English, you will not impress your colleagues, your manager, your directors. They will not feel the level of trust and confidence in you, that you can pull it off, that you can actually do what you're supposed to do, that you're actually ready for the next position, for an international trip, for training, for more. If you're constantly resorting to reading your presentation. Why did I stop showing slides here? Because sometimes I caught myself reading the slides. And even though I don't need to read them, I realize that I need to do what I teach. And I don't want to have to look at slides anymore. So I'm just talking to the camera, just looking at you right now, hoping that you Smash that like button, by the way. But I do have trouble looking at the camera. So it's not just that I was reading, but I have trouble looking at the camera. So this is an exercise I'm doing right now so that I can look closely to the camera so that I can feel like I'm talking to you. I hope you enjoy this new change. It is a challenge for me, but I love a challenge. I absolutely adore being challenged. But I do understand that when you're making a presentation, when you're giving a presentation, you may have bullet points that I have no problems with. And sometimes in those lessons, you can watch my videos. I was reading examples and I would say, I'm going to read the example. There's no problem signaling to your audience you're going to read something. That's not the problem, actually. The problem is when you're always doing that. When you hide the notes, and you keep reading and reading and reading. And you could be wondering, oh, but Priscilla, nobody's going to know. They're not going to know. No one is going to know. They are going to know. Oh, but they're not. They can't see me. I don't see them. Yes, but the intonation will sound robotic. And think about this. What if after a Zoom presentation, someone sends you a message and says, hey, we're going to have an in-person meeting next week. We want you to make this presentation again. Holy moly. Imagine how nervous you're going to feel. So it's important that you learn to prepare for presentations. This is something that I work on the most with my business students, how to prepare for business presentations. And when you're preparing, one recommendation I would give is record yourself. Open your laptop. My laptop is right here. And then turn on the camera, press record, and talk, looking at the camera. You can sometimes look away to click on a slide or something, to move on to the next slide. There's no problems. A meeting is supposed to be flexible and dynamic. It's natural. But always go back to the most important person in the room. I hope you enjoyed this video. Share it with a friend. But other than that, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.